Hello, dear friend. Welcome to this quiet corner of time where we'll walk together through the gentle mists of history. Tonight, we're going to visit a world that existed long, long ago, a world of simple people living simple lives in medieval times. There's no need to hurry, no need to worry about anything at all. Just settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let your breathing slow as we begin this peaceful journey together. Close your eyes if you'd like, or let them rest softly on whatever feels comfortable. We're going to step back through the centuries, past the noise and rush of modern life, past the industrial age, past the Renaissance, all the way back to a time when life moved at the pace of the seasons, when the sun and moon governed the rhythm of days, and when the most important sounds were the lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through grain, and the gentle hearth fires. Their lives were hard, yes, but there was a rhythm to their hardship, a pattern as old as humanity itself. They knew the comfort of routine, the satisfaction of work well done, the peace that comes from knowing your place in the world and doing it well. Tonight, we'll walk in their footsteps, see through their eyes, and feel the gentle pulse of their daily lives. Let's begin on a morning in the year 1347, in a small village nestled in the rolling hills of what we now call England. The name of this village has been lost to time, but we can imagine it was something simple and beautiful, perhaps Millbrook or Fairfield or Stonebridge. The exact name doesn't matter. What matters is that it was home to about 200 souls, most of them bound to the land they worked, living in small cottages with walls of wattle and daub, roofs of golden thatch, and windows that were more like small doorways, covered with oiled cloth to keep out the wind and rain. The sun hasn't yet painted the eastern sky with its first blush of rose and gold, but already there's movement in the village. Not the sudden jarring alarm of our modern world, but a gradual awakening that follows the ancient rhythms of necessity and nature. In a cottage near the village green, a young woman named Margot is stirring in her bed of straw and rough woolen blankets. She's perhaps 20 years old, though she doesn't count her years the way we do. She measures time in seasons, in harvests, in the slow cycle of planting and reaping that governs her world. Her hands are rough from work, but her face in sleep is peaceful, relaxed, touched with the kind of deep rest that comes from honesty and a clear conscience. The cottage is small, just one room, really, with a hard-packed earth floor and a central hearth that serves for both cooking and warmth. The walls are thick, made of wooden frames filled with wattle, woven sticks and branches, and daubed with a mixture of mud, clay, and straw. They're not pretty by our standards, but they're warm and solid, and they've kept Margot's family dry through many a winter storm. Margot shares this small space with her husband Edmund, a man whose broad shoulders and calloused hands speak of years spent following the plow and swinging the scythe. Their two children, little Sarah and baby Thomas, sleep close by, curled together like puppies for warmth. The cottage smells of smoke and herbs, of the dried lavender hanging from the rafters, of the turnips and onions stored in the corner, of the honest sweat of people who work hard and sleep deeply. But now, as the first pale light begins to seep through the oiled cloth window, Margot's internal clock, more reliable than any timepiece, tells her it's time to rise. She doesn't jolt awake with the harsh sound of an alarm. Instead, she surfaces slowly from sleep, like a flower opening to the morning sun. Her eyes flutter open, and for a moment she lies still, listening to the sounds of the waking world around her. From somewhere in the village comes the soft lowing of cattle, waiting to be milked. A rooster crows, though not with the sharp, startling sound of our imagination, but with a drowsy, half-hearted call that seems to ask rather than demand that the world wake up. In the distance, barely audible, comes the gentle splash and creak of the water wheel at the mill, turning slowly in the stream that runs through the village. Margot stretches, careful not to wake Edmund, and slips from beneath the woolen blankets. The morning air is cool against her skin, and she reaches for the rough linen shift that serves as her nightgown, undergarment, and on the hottest days, her only clothing. Over this, she pulls on a simple dress made of undyed wool, dyed brown with oak bark and walnut hulls. It's her second best dress. Her only other one is saved for church on Sundays and feast days. The dress is long and loose, designed for work rather than fashion. It has no buttons. Buttons are expensive and rare, but is held closed with a simple cord at the waist. The sleeves are long and can be rolled up when she works, and the hem falls to her ankles to protect her legs from thorns and brambles. It's not beautiful in the way we might think of beauty, but it's practical and well made, sewn by Margot's own hands during the long winter evenings when the family gathered around the fire. She moves quietly to the hearth, where last night's fire has burned down to a bed of glowing coals. This is one of the most important moments of the day, and one that required careful planning the night before. Fire is precious in this world, difficult to start, expensive to maintain, dangerous if not properly tended. To let the fire die completely would mean a cold, hungry morning and the difficult task of starting a new fire from scratch. Margot kneels beside the hearth and gently blows on the coals, encouraging them to brighten. She adds a handful of dry kindling, twigs, and small branches that Edmund gathered the evening before, and watches with satisfaction as small flames begin to lick at the wood. The fire catches, and she adds larger pieces, building it up slowly and carefully. The growing light dances on the walls, casting gentle shadows that make the small cottage feel warm and alive. As the fire begins to crackle and pop, Margot sets a clay pot filled with water on an iron tripod over the flames. This will be for the morning pottage, a thick porridge made from whatever grains and vegetables are available. Today it will be barley and oats, with some onions and herbs from the garden, and perhaps a small piece of bacon if they're lucky. While the water heats, Margot steps outside into the cool morning air. The village is waking up around her, but slowly, quietly. There's no rush, no hurry. Time moves differently here, measured not by the ticking of clocks, but by the position of the sun, the needs of the animals, the rhythm of the seasons. The sky is lightening now, painted in soft shades of pink and gold. The air is fresh and clean, carrying the scent of dew on grass, of wood smoke from the chimneys, of the rich dark earth that has been turned by the plow. Margot takes a deep breath, filling her lungs with the sweet morning air, and feels the peace that comes from being in harmony with the natural world. Behind her cottage is a small garden, perhaps 30 feet square, enclosed by a low fence of woven branches. Here, Margot grows the vegetables that will feed her family through the year: onions and leeks, cabbage and turnips, peas and beans, herbs like sage and thyme and rosemary. It's her domain, her responsibility, and she tends it with the same care and attention that Edmund gives to the fields. She walks among the plants, checking for signs of disease or pest damage, pulling a few weeds that have dared to show their faces. The garden is neat and orderly, every plant in its proper place, every row straight and true. This is not just practical, though it certainly is that, but also a source of pride and satisfaction. In a world where so much is uncertain, where the weather can destroy a harvest and hunger is always a possibility, a well-tended garden represents security, care, and hope for the future. The sun is climbing higher now, and Margot knows that soon she'll hear the church bell calling the village to morning prayer. But first, there are animals to tend. Behind the cottage, In a small pen made of wooden stakes and woven branches live the family's most precious possessions: 2 chickens, a pig, and a goat. The chickens are already stirring, making soft, sleepy sounds as they stretch their wings and shake their feathers. These are not the plump white birds of modern farms, but smaller, scrappier creatures with brown and red feathers that shimmer in the morning light. They're hardy birds, able to survive on scraps and forage, and they provide the family with eggs when they're laying and occasionally, on special occasions, with meat. Margot scatters a handful of grain for the chickens, speaking to them in the soft crooning voice she uses with all the animals. "Good morning, my ladies," she murmurs. "Time to wake up and earn your keep." The chickens cluck and flutter, pecking at the grain with enthusiasm, their feathers ruffling in the morning breeze. The pig is still sleeping, a large dark shape curled up in the corner of the pen. This is not the pink, clean pig of modern farms, but a hairy, wild-looking creature that's more like a small boar. It's intelligent and hardy, able to forage for itself in the forest and turn scraps into meat. The pig represents the family's insurance against winter hunger. Come autumn, it will be slaughtered, and every part of it used, from the meat to the bones to the bristles. But the goat is already awake, standing at the fence and looking at Margot with bright, intelligent eyes. This is Daisy, though of course she's not really called that. Names for animals are different in this time, more descriptive and practical. She's a small, sturdy creature with a coat of brown and white, and she's the family's most important animal. She provides milk for drinking and for making cheese, and her milk can mean the difference between health and sickness for the children. Margot opens the gate and leads Daisy to a stake in the village common, where she can graze on the sweet grass. The common is a large area of land that belongs to the whole village, where everyone's animals can graze together. It's one of the ways that the villagers share resources and work together for the common good. As she walks back to the cottage, Margot passes other villagers beginning their day. There's old William, already heading out to the fields with his hoe over his shoulder, walking with the slow, steady gait of a man who knows he has a long day ahead of him. There's young Mary, carrying a bucket to the well, her bare feet silent on the dirt path. There's the baker's wife, sweeping the doorstep of her cottage, raising a small cloud of dust that sparkles in the morning. No one hurries, no one runs. Everyone moves with the deliberate, measured pace of people who understand that the day's work cannot be rushed, that trying to hurry will only lead to mistakes and exhaustion. There's time for a nod, a smile, a quiet word of greeting. "Good morning, Margot."
"Morning, Alice. How's your little one?" "Much better, thank you. The fever broke in the night."
These small exchanges are important. In a world where people live so close together, where survival depends on cooperation and mutual support, these daily connections are the threads that weave the community together. They're not just pleasantries. They're the way people check on each other, share information, offer help when it's needed. Back in the cottage, the water is beginning to bubble gently in the pot. Margot adds the barley and oats, stirring them with a wooden spoon that's been smoothed by years of use. The grain settles into the water with a soft whisper, and she adjusts the pot on its tripod, making sure it's not too close to the flames. Pottage is simple to make, but it requires patience and attention. Too much heat, and it will burn and stick to the bottom of the pot. Too little, and it will never cook properly. While the pottage simmers, she prepares the other elements of the morning meal. There's a small loaf of bread left from yesterday, dark, coarse bread made from a mixture of wheat, rye, and barley. It's nothing like the soft white bread we know today, but it's substantial and nourishing, and it will fill the belly and provide energy for the morning's work. She cuts the bread into thick slices with a sharp knife, one of her most valuable possessions. The knife is simple but well made, with a wooden handle worn smooth by her hands and a blade that Edmund keeps sharp on a whetstone. It's used for everything from cutting bread to preparing vegetables to cleaning fish, and it's cared for with the attention that valuable tools deserve. Edmund is stirring now, waking slowly as the smell of cooking food and the sound of Margot's quiet movements penetrate his sleep. He's a big man, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of strength that comes from a lifetime of physical work. His hands are scarred from years of handling tools and working with wood and metal, but they're gentle hands too, capable of the delicate work of repairing a harness or setting a broken bone. He sits up in bed, running his hands through his hair, and looks around the cottage with eyes that are still heavy with sleep. But there's no complaint in his expression, no reluctance to face the day. This is the rhythm of his life, and he accepts it with the same quiet dignity that he brings to everything else. "Good morning, wife," he says softly, his voice still rough with sleep. "How does the day look?" Margot turns from the hearth, stirring spoon in hand, and smiles at him. It's a small smile, but it's warm and genuine, full of the quiet affection that comes from years of shared work and shared hardship. "The sky is clear," she says. "It should be a good day for the fields." Edmund nods, pleased. A clear day means good working conditions, no rain to turn the soil to mud or to delay the harvest. He swings his legs out of bed and reaches for his clothes, a simple tunic and hose made of the same rough wool as Margot's dress. His clothes are practical, designed for work, with no ornament or decoration except for the simple beauty of good craftsmanship. The children are stirring now too, awakened by the sounds and smells of the morning. Little Sarah, who is perhaps 5 years old, sits up and rubs her eyes with small fists. She's a pretty child, with her mother's gentle features and her father's steady gaze. Her hair is long and light brown, and it's tangled from sleep, but she makes no complaint. She's already learning the patience and acceptance that will serve her well in this world. Baby Thomas, who is not quite 2, is awake but content to lie in his small bed, playing with his fingers and making soft baby sounds. He's a healthy, robust child, and his parents are grateful for this. In a world where infant mortality is high, where disease and hunger are constant threats, a healthy child is a blessing beyond measure. The family gathers around the small wooden table for their morning meal. The table is simple but sturdy, made by Edmund's own hands from oak that grew in the village forest. It's scarred and stained from years of use, but it's solid and reliable, and it has served the family well. The benches are equally simple, just planks of wood supported by wooden legs, but they're comfortable enough for the purpose. Margot serves the pottage in wooden bowls, each one carved from a single piece of wood and polished smooth by use. The pottage is thick and hearty, with a rich, nutty flavor from the barley and oats. It's sweetened with a small amount of honey, a precious commodity that the family saves for special occasions, and flavored with herbs from the garden. The bread is passed around, each person taking their share, with the careful attention of people who understand that food is not to be wasted. Even the smallest crumb has value, and nothing edible is thrown away. What the family doesn't eat will go to the animals, and what the animals don't eat will go to the compost heap, where it will rot down to enrich the soil of the garden. They eat in comfortable silence, enjoying the simple pleasure of warm food on a cool morning. There's no hurry, no rush to finish and move on to the next task. This is part of the rhythm of their lives, this quiet time together at the beginning of the day, when the family connects and prepares for the work ahead. As they eat, they can hear the sounds of the village waking up around them. The church bell begins to ring, calling the faithful to morning prayer. It's not the complex musical chiming of a modern carillon, but a simple, clear note that carries across the village and into the surrounding countryside. The bell is bronze, cast by skilled craftsmen and blessed by the priest, and its voice is both a call to worship and a marker of time. Edmund finishes his pottage and sets down his spoon. "I'll be in the north field today," he says, speaking to Margot but also to the children, including them in the adult conversation. The barley is ready for cutting, and the weather looks to hold fair. Margot nods. She knows the rhythm of the agricultural year as well as he does, knows that this is the critical time when the success or failure of the harvest will determine how well the family eats through winter. "And I'll check the beans in the south field. They should be ready for picking soon." These are not just casual comments, but careful planning, the kind of coordination that's necessary when every day's work is important and every person's contribution matters. Edmund and Margot have learned to work together as a team, each understanding their role and responsibilities, each supporting the other in the endless cycle of work that keeps the family alive and fed. After the meal, Edmund prepares for his day in the fields. He puts on his work clothes, a simple tunic that reaches to his knees, hose that cover his legs, and a felt hat to protect his head from the sun. He straps on his leather belt, from which hang his most important tools, his knife, his whetstone, and a small pouch that contains the odds and ends that any working man needs, a bit of string, a few nails, a needle and thread for emergency repairs. He picks up his scythe from where it leans against the wall. The scythe is a beautiful tool, despite its utilitarian purpose. The handle is long and curved, made from ash wood that has been carefully selected and shaped. The blade is steel, hammered and forged by the village blacksmith, sharp enough to slice through grain stems with a whisper-soft sound. It's been in Edmund's family for generations, passed down from father to son, and it's been cared for with the respect that valuable tools deserve. Before he leaves, Edmund takes a moment to check the blade's sharpness, running his thumb carefully along the edge. It's sharp enough to cut, but not quite sharp enough for the heavy work ahead. He takes out his whetstone, a smooth, flat stone that's been worn to the perfect shape by years of use, and begins to sharpen the blade with long, smooth strokes. The sound of steel on stone is rhythmic and soothing, like a slow, metallic heartbeat. It's a sound that speaks of preparation, of care, of the kind of attention to detail that separates good work from poor work. Edmund takes his time, making sure that each stroke is even and true, that the blade is sharp from heel to toe. As he works, he hums quietly to himself, a tune that has no words but carries the rhythm of the work song. It's a song that's been passed down through generations of workers, a melody that helps to coordinate the movements of harvest teams, that makes the work go faster and feel less like drudgery. When the blade is sharp to his satisfaction, Edmund tests it on a piece of straw, watching with approval as it cuts cleanly through the stem. He wipes the blade clean with a cloth, then sets the scythe aside and begins his morning prayers. Prayer is an important part of life in this world, not just on Sundays, but every day, woven into the fabric of daily existence. Edmund is not a learned man. He cannot read or write, and his knowledge of Latin extends only to the responses he's learned by heart at Mass, but his faith is deep and genuine, a source of strength and comfort in a world that can be harsh and uncertain. He kneels on the hard earth floor, his hands clasped before him, his head bowed in respect and humility. His prayer is simple and direct, asking for God's blessing on the day's work, for protection from harm, for a good harvest, for the health of his family. He asks for strength to do his work well, for patience in difficulties, for the wisdom to make good decisions. These are not elaborate prayers full of fancy words and complex theology. They're the prayers of a simple man, spoken from the heart, asking for the basic things that matter: food, shelter, health, safety. In a world where so much is beyond human control, where the weather can destroy a year's work in a single storm, where disease can strike without warning, these prayers are both an expression of faith and a recognition of human frailty. When Edmund finishes his prayers, he rises to his feet and picks up his scythe. He kisses Margot goodbye, a simple, affectionate gesture that speaks of years of shared life and mutual respect. He ruffles Sarah's hair and pats baby Thomas on the head, then steps out into the morning air. The sun is fully up now, casting long shadows across the village and painting the thatched roofs with golden light. The air is warming, but it's still cool and fresh, carrying the promise of a hot day to come. Edmund can smell the rich scent of the earth, the green smell of growing things, the faint sweetness of the grain that's ready for harvest. He walks through the village, his feet making soft sounds on the packed earth of the path. The village is fully awake now, and he passes other men heading to the fields, each carrying the tools of his trade. There's young Thomas with his sickle, old Martin with his hoe, Peter the miller's son with a great wooden rake. They nod to each other as they pass, sharing the quiet camaraderie of men who work together, who understand each other's struggles and challenges. The path leads out of the village and across the common land, where the animals are grazing peacefully in the morning sun. The grass is wet with dew, and it sparkles like diamonds in the light. The air is full of the sounds of nature: birdsong, the buzz of insects, the rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth. It's a peaceful scene, one that speaks of the harmony between humans and the natural world. Beyond the common land lie the great fields that surround the village, stretching as far as the eye can see. These are not the neat, regular fields of modern agriculture, but long, narrow strips of land that follow the contours of the hills and valleys. Each family has several strips scattered throughout the different fields, ensuring that everyone has access to both the best and the worst land. The field system is ancient and complex, governed by traditions that have been passed down for generations. It's a system that ensures fairness, that prevents any one family from monopolizing the best land, that spreads the risks of crop failure. It's not efficient by modern standards, but it works. Edmund's strips are in the north field, as he told Margot, and he can see them in the distance, golden with ripe barley. The grain waves gently in the morning breeze, creating patterns of light and shadow that ripple across the field like water. It's a beautiful sight, one that fills him with satisfaction and pride. The grain is thick and healthy, the heads heavy with kernels that will provide bread for his family through the coming winter. But first it must be harvested, and harvest is hard, demanding work that requires skill, strength, and endurance. Edmund has been doing this work for 20 years, since he was old enough to hold a scythe, and he knows exactly what needs to be done. But knowledge doesn't make the work any easier, and he takes a moment to prepare himself mentally for the long day ahead. He begins with a prayer, asking for strength and safety in his work. Then he takes his position at the edge of his first strip, plants his feet firmly on the ground, and raises the scythe. The blade catches the morning light, flashing silver in the sun, and Edmund takes a deep breath, feeling the familiar weight of the tool in his hands. The first cut is always the most important. It sets the rhythm for all the cuts that follow, establishes the pattern that will carry him through the day. Edmund swings the scythe in a smooth, flowing arc, the blade cutting through the grain stems with a soft, whispered sound. The barley falls in a neat swath, lying across the stubble in perfect order. He moves forward, swing after swing, each cut flowing into the next with the kind of rhythm that comes from years of practice. His movements are economical and efficient, wasting no energy on unnecessary motions. The scythe becomes an extension of his body, an extension of his will, cutting through the grain with mechanical precision. But this is not mindless work. Edmund's eyes are constantly moving, checking the grain, watching for stones or holes that might trip him, adjusting his position to account for the slope of the land. He listens to the sound of the blade, which tells him whether it's cutting cleanly or beginning to dull. He feels the resistance of the grain, which tells him about the thickness of the stems and the weight of the heads. As he works, other men join him in the field. This is community work, and while each man is responsible for his own strips, they work together, helping each other, sharing the load. There's Robert from the next village over, who helps with the harvest in exchange for a share of the grain. There's young William, who's learning the trade from his father. There's old John, whose hands are too arthritic to handle a scythe anymore, but who can still rake and gather the cut grain. They work in comfortable silence, each man focused on his own task, but aware of the others around him. The sound of the scythes creates a rhythm that carries across the field, a whispered music that speaks of human cooperation and shared purpose. Occasionally, someone will call out a warning, stone ahead, or rough ground, but mostly they work in the peaceful quiet of men who understand each other and their task. The sun climbs higher and the air grows warmer. The dew evaporates, leaving the grass dry and the air shimmering with heat. Edmund can feel the sweat beginning to form on his forehead, but he doesn't stop. The rhythm of the work carries him forward, each swing of the scythe bringing him closer to the completion of his task. Behind him, the women and children follow, gathering the cut grain into bundles called sheaves. This is skilled work too, requiring knowledge of how to tie the grain properly so that it won't fall apart, how to arrange the sheaves so that they'll dry evenly, how to stack them so that the rain will run off and not soak into the grain. Margot is among the women, working with the same quiet efficiency that she brings to everything else. She moves through the cut grain like a dancer, her movements graceful and sure, her hands working without conscious thought. She gathers the barley into neat bundles, ties them with a twist of straw, and sets them aside for the men to carry to the storage area. The work is hard, but there's satisfaction in it, the kind of deep pleasure that comes from doing something well, something important, something that matters. Each sheaf represents food for the winter, security for the family, success in the eternal struggle against hunger and want. The grain is beautiful in its own way, golden and rich, heavy with the promise of bread and beer and the other necessities of life. As the morning progresses, the field is transformed. Where once there was a sea of waving grain, now there are neat rows of stubble, dotted with the golden sheaves that will soon be carried to the barn. The work is methodical and orderly, following patterns that have been established over centuries of trial and error. The sun reaches its zenith, and the workers pause for their midday meal. This is not a formal break, but a natural pause in the rhythm of work, a time to rest and restore their strength for the afternoon's labor. They gather in the shade of a great oak tree that stands at the edge of the field, its massive trunk scarred by centuries of weather, its branches spreading wide to provide welcome relief from the heat. Margot has brought bread and ale, as she promised, along with cheese and onions from the garden. The bread is the same coarse, dark loaf they had for breakfast, but it tastes wonderful after the morning's work. The ale is mild and refreshing, brewed by Margot herself from barley and hops, flavored with herbs and honey. It's not the strong drink that we might think of when we hear the word ale, but a gentle, nourishing beverage that provides both hydration and energy. The workers eat slowly, savoring the food and the brief respite from labor. They talk quietly among themselves, sharing news and gossip, discussing the progress of the harvest, planning the afternoon's work. The conversation is peaceful and companionable, the kind of easy talk that flows between people who have known each other for years. Old John tells a story about a harvest from his youth, when a sudden storm caught the workers in the field and they had to work through the night to save the grain. Young William asks questions about the proper way to sharpen a scythe, and Edmund demonstrates the technique, his movements slow and careful, so that the boy can follow along. The women discuss the progress of their own work, comparing notes on the best ways to tie sheaves, sharing techniques that have been passed down from mother to daughter for generations. There's talk of the gardens, of the vegetables that are ready for harvest, of the preserving and storing that will occupy the coming weeks. All of this talk is practical, focused on the work at hand and the preparations for winter, but there's also warmth in it, the kind of human connection that makes hard work bearable, that transforms individual struggle into community effort. These people depend on each other, not just for help with the work, but for the social bonds that make life meaningful. As they rest, the children play quietly in the shade, their games simple and imaginative. Little Sarah and her friends make dolls from corn husks and flowers, creating elaborate stories about their adventures. The boys play with wooden swords, reenacting the stories they've heard of knights and heroes, but their play is gentle and good-natured, more about imagination than aggression. Baby Thomas sleeps in his mother's arms, lulled by the warmth of the day and the gentle sounds of adult conversation. He's a contented child, secure in the knowledge that he's loved and cared for, surrounded by the familiar faces and voices of his extended family and community. The break is brief, but restorative. As the sun begins its descent from the zenith, the workers rise and return to their tasks. The afternoon work is harder than the morning, the heat more intense, the fatigue more pronounced. But the rhythm of the work carries them forward, and the sight of the steadily growing stacks of sheaves provides motivation and encouragement. Edmund returns to his scythe, checking the blade once more, adjusting his grip, settling into the familiar rhythm. The grain falls before him like golden waves, each swing bringing him closer to the completion of his tasks. His muscles ache and his back is sore, but he pushes on, driven by the knowledge that the weather might change, that every day of good harvest weather is precious and not to be wasted. Around him, the other workers continue their tasks with the same quiet determination. There's no complaint, no grumbling, no desire to quit and go home. This is the work that defines their lives, the work that ensures their survival, and they approach it with the kind of dedication that modern people might reserve for their most important projects. The afternoon wears on, and gradually the field is cleared. The last swaths of grain fall to the scythes, the last sheaves are gathered and tied. The sun is beginning to sink toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air is cooling, and a gentle breeze stirs the leaves of the oak tree, bringing the promise of a pleasant evening. As the work nears completion, the mood of the workers shifts from focused concentration to quiet satisfaction. They've accomplished something important today, something that will benefit not just themselves, but their families and their community. The grain that they've harvested will feed their children through the winter, will provide seed for next year's planting, will be transformed into bread and beer and all the other necessities of life. The sheaves are loaded onto wooden carts, their wheels creaking as they roll across the stubbled field. The carts are pulled by oxen, massive, patient beasts that have been bred for strength and endurance rather than speed. The oxen move slowly but steadily, their hooves making soft sounds on the earth, their breath coming in rhythmic puffs. The procession back to the village is ceremonial as well as practical. The loaded carts represent the successful completion of the harvest, the triumph of human effort over the challenges of nature. The workers walk beside the carts, their tools over their shoulders, their faces showing the quiet pride of a job well done. As they enter the village, they're greeted by those who stayed behind, the elderly, the very young, the sick and injured who couldn't participate in the harvest, but who shared in its benefits. There are smiles and words of congratulation, expressions of gratitude and relief. The harvest is not just Edmund's success or Robert's success, but the success of the entire community. The grain is stored in the great barn that stands at the center of the village, its massive timber frame rising like the ribs of some ancient beast against the darkening sky. This barn is one of the most important buildings in the village, more crucial in many ways than even the church, for it holds the difference between life and death through the long winter months. Its walls are thick oak planks, fitted together with the skill that comes from generations of experience, and its roof is steep and well thatched to shed the rain and snow. Inside the barn, the air is cool and dry, filled with the sweet scent of fresh grain and the dusty smell of old timber. The sheaves are stacked in careful rows, each one placed precisely to allow air to circulate while protecting the grain from moisture and pests. The work of storing the grain is as important as the work of harvesting it, for grain that is not properly stored will rot or be eaten by mice and rats, turning months of hard work into nothing. Edmund helps to carry the sheaves into the barn, his movements careful and deliberate despite his fatigue. Each sheaf is heavy with grain, and the work requires strength and attention, but there's satisfaction in it too, the deep pleasure that comes from seeing the fruits of one's labor safely stored away. As he stacks the sheaves, he can already imagine the bread that will come from this grain, the warm loaves that will grace his family's table through the dark months ahead. The work of storing the harvest continues. As the sun sets, the workers using torches and oil lamps to light their way. The flames flicker and dance in the gentle evening breeze, casting moving shadows on the barn walls and creating an atmosphere that's both practical and mystical. There's something ancient and sacred about this work, this careful preservation of the grain that will sustain life through winter. As they work, the villagers talk quietly among themselves, their voices soft and companionable in the gathering dusk. They speak of the quality of this year's harvest, comparing it to previous years, discussing the prospects for winter. The grain is good this year, thick and heavy, with few signs of disease or pest damage. It's a blessing, and they're grateful for it. Old Martha, the village wise woman, examines some of the grain, running it through her fingers with the practiced touch of someone who has seen many harvests. Her verdict is positive. The grain is dry and clean, well-formed, and free from the black fungus that sometimes ruins entire harvests. God has smiled on us this year, she says, and the others nod in agreement, sharing her quiet satisfaction. When the last sheaf is safely stored, the workers gather outside the barn for a moment of prayer and thanksgiving. This is not a formal religious ceremony, but a spontaneous expression of gratitude for the successful completion of the harvest. They stand in a loose circle, their heads bowed, their voices joining in the ancient words of the Te Deum. The prayer rises into the night air, carried on the smoke from their torches, an offering of gratitude to the God who has blessed their work. The words are Latin, learned by heart rather than understood intellectually, but their meaning is clear in the hearts of those who speak them. They are words of praise and thanksgiving, of recognition of human dependence on divine providence. After the prayer, the workers disperse to their homes, carrying their tools, walking slowly through the quiet village streets. The day's work is done, but the sense of accomplishment and community satisfaction remains. They have worked together, struggled together, succeeded together, and the bonds forged in shared labor will sustain them through the challenges ahead. Edmund walks home beside Margot, their children sleepy in her arms. Little Sarah walks between them, her small hand in her father's large one, her steps slow and tired, but her spirit still bright. Baby Thomas has fallen asleep against his mother's shoulder, his breathing soft and regular, his small body relaxed in complete trust. The village is settling into its evening routine. From cottage windows comes the warm glow of firelight, and from chimneys rises the thin smoke of cooking fires. The air carries the scent of wood smoke and cooking food, the comfortable domestic smells that speak of home and safety and the end of a good day's work. In their own cottage, Margot quickly prepares the evening meal while Edmund tends to the animals. The pottage left from morning has been simmering slowly all day, and now it's thick and rich, flavored with herbs and vegetables from the garden. There's bread, of course, and cheese made from Daisy's milk, and a small piece of bacon that Margot has saved for this special day. They eat by the light of a single candle, its flame steady and bright in the still air of the cottage. The meal is simple but satisfying, and they eat it with the deep appreciation that comes from physical tiredness and honest hunger. The food tastes especially good tonight, seasoned as it is with the satisfaction of work well done. As they eat, Edmund tells Margot about the day's work, describing the quality of the grain, the progress of the harvest, the help he received from his neighbors. These are not just casual observations, but important information that affects the family's planning for the months ahead. The successful harvest means security, but it also means responsibility. The grain must be carefully managed to last through winter and provide seed for spring planting. After the meal, the family gathers around the fire for the evening's activities. Edmund takes out a piece of wood and his carving knife, continuing work on a new wooden bowl that he's making for little Sarah. The work is slow and careful, each cut deliberate and precise. Wood is precious, and there's no room for mistakes, but Edmund has skilled hands and years of experience. The bowl is taking shape beautifully, its sides smooth and even, its proportions pleasing to the eye. Margot sits with her spinning wheel, turning wool into thread that will eventually become cloth for the family's clothing. The wheel turns steadily, its gentle humming providing a soothing background to the evening's activities. Her hands move automatically, feeding the wool onto the spindle, controlling the thickness of the thread with the kind of unconscious skill that comes from years of practice. The spinning wheel is one of Margot's most prized possessions, made by the village carpenter as part of her dowry when she married Edmund. It's a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, its wooden frame smooth and well proportioned, its wheel perfectly balanced. But more than its beauty, it's the tool that allows Margot to transform raw wool into the thread that will clothe her family, making it one of the most practical and valuable items in the cottage. Little Sarah sits close to her mother, watching the spinning with wide, interested eyes. She's learning, as all children do in this world, by observation and imitation. Soon she'll be old enough to help with simple tasks, carding wool, winding thread, holding skeins while her mother works. These skills will be essential to her adult life, and she's absorbing them now without conscious effort, as naturally as she learned to walk and talk. Baby Thomas plays quietly on the floor, exploring a collection of simple toys, wooden blocks carved by his father, corn husk dolls made by his mother, smooth stones collected from the stream. His play is quiet and absorbed, the kind of peaceful activity that speaks of a child who feels safe and loved, who has no need to demand attention or create drama. The fire burns steadily in the hearth, its flames dancing and crackling, providing both light and warmth. The wood is oak and ash, carefully selected and dried, burning with the steady heat that will keep the cottage warm through the night. The fire is never allowed to die completely. Banking it with ash and careful arrangement of the logs will keep coals alive until morning, ready to be encouraged back to flame with bellows and kindling. As the evening progresses, neighbors stop by to visit. This is a natural part of the village's social rhythm, especially after a successful day's work. There's much to discuss: the progress of the harvest, plans for the coming days, news and gossip from other villages. The cottage is small, but there's always room for guests, and hospitality is both a duty and a pleasure. Old William stops by first, settling gratefully onto a bench by the fire. He's tired from the day's work, but his spirits are high. The harvest has gone well, better than he dared hope earlier in the season, when a late frost threatened the young grain. He accepts a cup of ale from Margot and settles in to discuss the day's events with Edmund. The two men talk about practical matters, the condition of the grain, the weather prospects for the coming days, the schedule for threshing the harvested grain. But their conversation also ranges over wider topics: news from the market town, stories heard from traveling merchants, speculation about the intentions of their lord and the king. Young Peter joins them, bringing news from his work at the mill. The mill has been busy, grinding grain for several villages, and Peter has heard news from the wider world. There are rumors of war in France, of plague in the cities, of changes in the laws that govern the common people. Some of this news is troubling, but it feels distant and abstract to these villagers, whose lives are so closely tied to the land and the seasons. The women have their own conversation, centered around domestic concerns, but no less important for that. There's discussion of preserving and storing food for winter, of the progress of various pregnancies in the village, of children's health and education. These conversations are the way that vital information is shared, that community standards are maintained, that the intricate web of relationships that holds the village together is strengthened and renewed. Alice, the baker's wife, brings news of her daughter's betrothal to the blacksmith's son. It's a good match, she says, and the families are pleased. The young couple will marry in the spring, after the planting is done, and will set up housekeeping in a cottage that the young man is building with help from his father and the other men of the village. This news sparks a wider discussion of marriages and relationships in the village. In this world, marriage is not just a personal choice, but a community concern, affecting the distribution of land and resources, the balance of families, the network of obligations and support that holds society together. A good marriage strengthens the community. A bad one can cause problems that affect everyone. The conversation is comfortable and rambling, moving from topic to topic as such. Conversations do. There's no hurry, no pressure to cover particular subjects or reach specific conclusions. This is social time, a chance for people to relax and connect after the focused intensity of the day's work. As the night deepens, the visitors gradually take their leave. Old William is the first to go, gathering his walking stick and making his slow way home through the dark village streets. Peter follows, whistling softly as he walks, his young energy still high despite the long day. Alice is the last to leave, pausing at the door to arrange the details of a shared cooking project for the next day. When the visitors are gone, the family settles into its bedtime routine. This is a peaceful time, a gradual winding down from the activities of the day. Edmund banks the fire carefully, arranging the logs and covering them with ash to ensure that coals will survive until morning. Margot puts away her spinning wheel and gathers up the children's toys, restoring order to the small cottage. The children are bathed in a wooden tub filled with warm water from the fire. The bath is simple but thorough, and both children enjoy the warm water and their mother's gentle attention. They're dried with rough linen towels and dressed in clean sleeping shifts, ready for the night's rest. Prayers are said before bed, the whole family kneeling together by the dying fire. The prayers are simple and heartfelt, expressions of gratitude for the day's blessings, requests for protection through the night, hopes for health and prosperity in the days to come. The children add their own small prayers, Sarah asking for a fine day tomorrow so she can help in the garden, Thomas making unintelligible but clearly earnest sounds that his parents receive with the same attention they give to more articulate petitions. The family settles into bed, the children curled up together in their small bed, Edmund and Margot in theirs. The cottage grows quiet, filled only with the soft sounds of breathing and the gentle crackling of the dying fire. Outside, the village settles into sleep, the last lights winking out in cottage windows, the last sounds of human activity fading into the peaceful quiet of the night. But even as the humans sleep, the work of the village continues in quieter ways. In the barn, the stored grain continues its slow process of drying and curing. In the gardens, plants grow imperceptibly, drawing nutrients from the soil and moisture from the air. In the fields, the stubble left from the harvest begins its transformation back into soil, part of the endless cycle of growth and decay that sustains all life. The night passes peacefully, marked only by the soft chiming of the church bell that marks the hours. The stars wheel overhead, their ancient patterns familiar to anyone who works outdoors and knows the rhythms of the natural world. The moon rises, nearly full, bathing the village in gentle silver light that makes the thatched roofs and stone walls look like something from a fairy tale. Dawn comes slowly, as it always does in this world, where time moves at the pace of nature rather than the demands of clocks. The sky lightens gradually from black to gray, to rose to gold, and with the coming of light, the village begins to stir again. Smoke rises from chimneys as fires are rekindled from the night's banked coals. Doors open, and people emerge to greet another day. Margot is one of the first to rise, as is her custom. She slips quietly from the bed, careful not to wake Edmund, who has earned his rest after yesterday's hard work. She rekindles the fire, adds water to the pot for morning pottage, checks on the children who still sleep peacefully in their bed. Today will bring new tasks, different from yesterday's harvest work, but equally important. The grain has been safely gathered, but now it must be processed, threshed to separate the kernels from the straw, winnowed to remove the chaff, stored in ways that will keep it fresh and free from pests through the long winter months. But there are also the ongoing tasks that continue, regardless of the season's special demands. The animals must be tended, the garden maintained, the household kept clean and orderly. Margot moves through these morning tasks with the same quiet efficiency she brings to everything, each action part of a routine that has been refined through years of practice. As she works, she plans the day ahead. There are beans to be picked in the garden. They've been ready for several days, but the urgency of the grain harvest took precedence. There's bread to be baked. The family is nearly out, and fresh bread is essential for the day's meals. There are clothes to be washed. Edmund's work clothes are stained with sweat and grain dust, and the children always seem to find ways to soil their garments. These tasks might seem mundane, but they're the foundation upon which everything else rests. Clean clothes, fresh bread, tended animals, harvested vegetables. These are the details that make the difference between comfort and hardship, between health and sickness, between a household that runs smoothly and one that struggles with constant crisis. Edmund wakes as the smell of cooking pottage fills the cottage. He stretches, feeling the pleasant tiredness that comes from hard, productive work. His muscles are sore, but it's a satisfying soreness, the kind that speaks of effort well spent. He looks around the cottage with the eyes of a man who has provided well for his family, who has met his responsibilities and can face the day with confidence. The morning routine unfolds much as it did the day before, but with subtle differences that reflect the changing nature of the work. Today will not be spent in the fields with the scythe, but in the barn with flails and winnowing baskets, separating the precious grain from the straw that has protected it through its growth and harvest. After breakfast, Edmund joins the other men at the barn for the threshing. This is communal work, like the harvest itself, requiring coordination and cooperation among the workers. The threshing floor is a large flat area in the center of the barn, made of hard-packed earth that has been smoothed and leveled to create an ideal surface for the work. The sheaves are spread out on the threshing floor, their golden stalks rustling as they're arranged for the work ahead. The men take up their flails, long wooden handles with shorter pieces of wood attached by leather hinges. These are ancient tools, simple but effective, designed for the specific task of beating the grain from the stalks. The work begins with a rhythm that's both practical and beautiful. The men stand in a line, their flails rising and falling in sequence, creating a drumbeat that echoes through the barn. Each blow loosens grain from the stalks, sending kernels flying across the threshing floor. The work requires coordination. If the timing is off, the flails will collide, potentially causing injury. Edmund falls into the rhythm easily, his body remembering the motions from countless previous threshing sessions. The flail feels familiar in his hands. Its weight and balance is known to him as his own limbs. He works steadily, methodically, his eyes focused on the grain beneath his flail, his movements automatic and efficient. The sound of the threshing fills the barn, the rhythmic beating of wood on grain, the rustle of straw, the soft patter of kernels hitting the floor. It's a hypnotic sound, one that seems to connect the workers to countless generations of their ancestors who performed this same task in this same way. As they work, the men talk quietly, their conversation flowing around and through the rhythm of their labor. They discuss the quality of the grain, the prospects for next year's planting, the state of their tools and equipment. There's also gossip and news, stories and jokes, the kind of social interaction that makes hard work bearable and even enjoyable. Young William is learning the trade, working beside his father and listening carefully to the older men's advice. His movements are still uncertain, his timing not quite perfect, but he's improving with each stroke. The other men are patient with him, offering encouragement and gentle correction, remembering their own apprenticeship to this ancient craft. The work continues through the morning, the pile of loose grain growing steadily on the threshing floor. The straw that remains after the grain is removed is not waste. It will be used for bedding for the animals, for thatching roofs, for a dozen other purposes. Nothing is wasted in this world where everything has value and scarcity is always a possibility. Meanwhile, in the village, the women pursue their own essential tasks. Margot works in her garden, harvesting the beans that have ripened while she was busy with the grain harvest. The beans are beautiful, long green pods that hang heavy on their vines, filled with the seeds that will provide protein through the winter months. She moves through the garden systematically, checking each plant, harvesting only the pods that are fully mature. The work requires judgment and experience. Beans picked too early will be small and underdeveloped, while those left too long will be tough and stringy. Margot has been growing beans for years, and she knows exactly what to look for. The garden is a peaceful place in the morning sun, filled with the gentle sounds of insects and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The plants are healthy and productive, their growth a testament to Margot's skill and attention. The beans climb on wooden poles, their vines twisted in graceful spirals, their leaves creating patches of cool shade. As she works, Margot's mind is busy with planning and calculation. How many beans will the family need for winter? How many should be saved for seed for next year's planting? Which ones are the best for drying, and which should be eaten fresh? These decisions will affect the family's nutrition and security through the months ahead. The beans go into a large wicker basket, their green pods bright against the pale wood. The basket is one of many that Margot has woven herself during the quiet winter evenings, using willow branches cut from the trees along the stream. It's strong and well made, designed to last for years of use in the garden and around the cottage. When the bean harvest is complete, Margot turns her attention to other garden tasks. The onions are ready for harvesting, their green tops beginning to yellow and fall over. These are precious vegetables. They store well through winter and add flavor to the simple dishes that will make up the family's diet during the cold months. She pulls the onions carefully, shaking the soil from their roots, examining each one for signs of disease or damage. The good onions will be braided together and hung in the cottage to dry, while any that show signs of problems will be used immediately. It's careful, methodical work that requires attention to detail and long-term thinking. The garden also contains herbs that need harvesting: sage and thyme, rosemary and mint, each with its own proper time for cutting and its own requirements for drying and storage. These herbs are not luxuries but necessities, providing both flavor and medicine for the family. A well-stocked herb garden can make the difference between health and sickness, between tasty food and bland sustenance. Margot cuts the herbs with a sharp knife, taking only what she needs, leaving enough growth to ensure that the plants will survive and produce again. She knows which herbs are best cut in the morning, which prefer the afternoon sun, which should be harvested before they flower, and which are better left until after. The harvested herbs go into separate baskets, each labeled in Margot's mind with its intended use. The sage will be dried and used to flavor the salt pork that will be the family's main source of meat through winter. The thyme will be used fresh in soups and stews, then dried for later use. The rosemary will be used sparingly, as it's strong and can easily overpower other flavors. Back in the barn, the threshing continues under Edmund's steady leadership. The rhythm of the flails has become almost meditative, a physical prayer that connects the workers to the grain, to the land, to the endless cycle of planting and harvest that sustains human life. The men work in comfortable silence, each focused on his own task, but aware of his place in the larger pattern. The grain accumulates steadily on the threshing floor, a golden treasure that represents months of careful work and favorable weather. Each kernel is precious, a small miracle of growth and transformation that began with a seed planted in the spring and has culminated in this moment of harvest and processing. As the morning wears on, the work shifts from threshing to winnowing, the process of separating the grain from the chaff and debris that remains mixed with it after threshing. This requires different tools and different skills, but it's equally important to the final quality of the grain. The winnowing is done with large, shallow baskets woven from willow and other flexible woods. The workers fill these baskets with the threshed grain and chaff, then toss the mixture into the air, allowing the wind to carry away the lighter chaff, while the heavier grain falls back into the basket. It's a skill that requires practice and timing, and the workers perform it with the kind of unconscious competence that comes from years of experience. Edmund works at the winnowing with the same steady concentration he brings to all his tasks. He fills his basket, tosses the grain high into the air, catches what falls back, and repeats the process until the grain is clean and pure. His movements are economical and efficient, wasting no motion, no energy. The winnowed grain is beautiful, golden kernels that gleam in the sunlight, clean and perfect, ready for storage or grinding into flour. The sight of it fills Edmund with satisfaction and pride. This grain represents security for his family, food for the winter, seed for next year's planting. It's the result of a year's work, and it's good work well done. The chaff that's blown away by the wind doesn't go to waste either. Much of it settles on the ground around the barn, where it will be raked up and used as bedding for animals or added to the compost heap that will enrich next year's garden. Even the waste products of grain processing have value in this world, where nothing is discarded lightly. As the winnowing nears completion, the mood of the workers shifts from focused concentration to quiet celebration. They've successfully completed another stage in the long process of turning grain into food, and the results are clearly good. The grain is clean and plump, free from disease and pest damage, perfectly suited for the long storage period that lies ahead. The clean grain is measured and divided according to ancient customs and agreements. A portion goes to the lord of the manor as payment for the use of his land. Another portion is set aside as seed for next year's planting. A third portion goes to the church as tithe. What remains belongs to the families who work to produce it, and it represents their security and sustenance through the coming winter. Edmund's share is substantial enough to feed his family through winter, with some left over for emergencies or trade. He looks at the grain with the eyes of a man who has worked hard and successfully provided for those who depend on him. The sight fills him with quiet satisfaction and gratitude. The grain is stored in large wooden chests, their lids tightly fitted to keep out moisture and pests. These chests are valuable pieces of furniture made by skilled craftsmen and designed to last for generations. They're lined with aromatic woods that help repel insects, and their construction allows air to circulate while preventing the entry of mice and rats. As Edmund helps to store the grain, he handles each container with care and respect. This grain represents more than food. It represents the successful completion of a cycle, the triumph of human effort over the uncertainties of weather and season, the continuation of life itself. Each kernel is a small miracle, and Edmund treats it as such. The work in the barn continues through the early afternoon as the last of the grain is processed and stored. The men work steadily but without hurry, taking time to do the job properly. There's no point in rushing through this crucial work. Grain that's not properly processed and stored will spoil, turning months of labor into waste. When the last container is filled and sealed, the workers pause for a moment of prayer and thanksgiving. This is spontaneous, not organized, but it reflects the deep spirituality that runs through all aspects of life in this world. The successful harvest and processing of grain is seen as a blessing, a gift from God that deserves acknowledgement and gratitude. The prayer is simple and heartfelt, spoken in the vernacular rather than Latin, coming from the hearts of men who understand their dependence on forces beyond their control. They give thanks for favorable weather, for healthy grain, for the strength to do the work, for the skills passed down from their fathers and grandfathers. After the prayer, the workers clean up the barn, sweeping the threshing floor, putting away their tools, restoring order to the space. The barn will be needed again. There are other grains to process, other crops to store, but for now the most important work is done, and done well. Edmund walks home in the late afternoon sun, his body tired, but his spirit light. The harvest is complete, the grain safely stored, the family's food security assured for another year. It's a good feeling, the satisfaction that comes from meeting one's responsibilities, from work well done, from the successful completion of tasks that matter. The village is peaceful in the afternoon light, its thatched roofs golden in the sun, smoke rising lazily from chimneys, children playing quietly in the dusty streets. It's a scene of contentment and security, of people who have worked hard and can now rest in the knowledge that they've provided well for themselves and their families. At home, Margot has been busy with her own important work. The beans have been picked and prepared for storage, some to be dried for winter use, others to be eaten fresh in the coming days. The herbs have been harvested and are hanging in bundles from the cottage rafters, filling the air with their sweet, clean scent. She's also been baking bread, using flour ground from last year's grain. The bread is dark and coarse by modern standards, but it's nourishing and filling, made with the skill that comes from years of practice. The smell of fresh bread fills the cottage, creating an atmosphere of warmth and welcome that speaks of home and security. The afternoon is spent in quiet domestic tasks. Edmund repairs a tool handle that was damaged during the harvest. Margot continues her spinning. The children play peacefully in the cottage yard. These are the moments that make life worthwhile, the quiet times between the intense periods of work, when families can be together and enjoy the fruits of their labor. As evening approaches, neighbors once again gather at the cottage for conversation and companionship. Tonight there's more to celebrate: the successful completion of the harvest, the safe storage of the grain, the assurance of food security through the coming winter. The mood is festive, though in the quiet, restrained way that characterizes all aspects of life in this world. The conversation ranges over many topics: the quality of this year's harvest compared to previous years, plans for winter projects, news from other villages. There's discussion of marriages and births, of illnesses and recoveries, of the small dramas and joys that make up the fabric of village life. Old Martha tells stories of harvests from years past, some successful, others challenging, all part of the long history of the village and its people. Her stories are both entertainment and education, helping the younger people understand the cycles and patterns that govern agricultural life, preparing them for the challenges they'll face in their own careers. Young people listen carefully to these stories, absorbing not just the specific details, but the deeper lessons about patience, persistence, and adaptation. They're learning that success in this world requires not just hard work, but wisdom, not just strength, but skill, not just individual effort, but community cooperation. The evening passes peacefully, filled with the kind of quiet satisfaction that comes from work completed and goals achieved. As the night deepens and the visitors take their leave, the family settles once again into its bedtime routine, grateful for another successful day, looking forward with confidence to the challenges and opportunities that tomorrow will bring. The cottage grows quiet as the family prepares for sleep, but outside, the village continues its gentle rhythm. The night sounds are peaceful: the soft hooting of an owl, the distant splash of the mill wheel, the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. These are the sounds of a world at peace with itself, where humans and nature exist in harmony, where the rhythms of life follow the ancient patterns that have sustained humanity for countless generations. As sleep comes to the village, the grain rests safely in its storage containers. The animals settle peacefully in their pens. The gardens grow quietly in the darkness. The work of today is done, and done well. Tomorrow will bring new tasks, new challenges, new opportunities for useful work and community cooperation. But for now, there is rest and peace and the deep satisfaction that comes from living in harmony with the natural world and the ancient rhythms of agricultural life. The stars wheel overhead in their eternal patterns, the same stars that have watched over countless generations of farmers and workers, the same patterns that will continue long after this particular harvest is forgotten. In their light, the village sleeps peacefully, secure in the knowledge that the ancient covenant between human effort and natural abundance has been renewed once again, that the cycle of planting and harvest continues, that life goes on in its quiet, determined way. Part 3. Evening's Gentle Rest. 15,000 words. And so we come to the closing of another day in this gentle world of long ago, where time moved like honey in winter sunlight, slow and golden and sweet. The harvest work is done for now, the grain safely stored, the immediate crisis of gathering the crops before weather could destroy them successfully resolved. But life in medieval times was never simply about crisis and resolution. It was about the steady, patient rhythm of daily tasks, the small satisfactions of work well done, the quiet pleasures of community and family that made even the hardest life bearable. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber, the village settles into the peaceful rhythm of evening. This is not the hurried, distracted evening of our modern world, with its artificial lights and electronic distractions. It's constant pressure to be somewhere else or do something different. This is evening as it was meant to be, a gentle winding down from the day's activities, a time for reflection and rest, for family and community, for the simple pleasures that cost nothing but attention and presence. In her cottage, Margot is preparing the evening meal with the same quiet efficiency she brings to all her tasks. The kitchen area is small but well organized, every item in its proper place, every tool ready for use. The hearth fire burns steadily, providing both heat for cooking and light for working, its flames dancing in the gentle evening breeze that stirs through the cottage. Tonight's meal will be special, a small celebration of the successful harvest. There's fresh bread, baked that afternoon while Edmund was finishing the work in the barn. The bread is dark and substantial, made from flour that was ground just days ago from last year's grain. It has the dense, satisfying texture that comes from stone-ground flour, and the slightly sour taste that develops from the wild yeasts that naturally ferment the dough. To go with the bread, Margot has prepared a pottage that's richer than usual, made with some of the fresh beans from the morning's harvest, flavored with herbs from the garden, and enriched with a precious piece of bacon from the family's small store of meat. The pottage simmers gently in its iron pot, filling the cottage with the warm, savory smell of home cooking. There's also cheese made from Daisy's milk and aged in the cool darkness of the cottage's small root cellar. The cheese is simple but delicious, with the sharp, clean taste that comes from careful attention to the traditional methods of cheese making. It's sliced thick and arranged on a wooden plate, alongside some of the onions that were harvested that morning. As she works, Margot hums quietly to herself, the same tune that Edmund hummed while sharpening his scythe that morning. It's a melody without words, passed down through generations of workers, a song that carries the rhythm of daily labor and the satisfaction of tasks completed. Her movements are graceful and economical, each gesture serving a purpose, nothing wasted or unnecessary. Edmund arrives home as the sun touches the tops of the trees, his work clothes dusty with grain chaff, his face showing the quiet satisfaction of another successful day. He pauses in the doorway of the cottage, taking a moment to appreciate the scene before him, his wife working peacefully at the hearth, his children playing quietly on the floor, the warm light of the fire creating an atmosphere of safety and welcome. This is what he works for, not just the grain in the barn or the coins that might come from selling surplus crops, but this moment of peace and contentment, this sense of having provided well for those who depend on him. It's a satisfaction that goes beyond material success, touching something deeper in the human heart, the need to be useful, to contribute, to make a difference in the lives of those we love. He sets down his tools and washes his hands and face in a basin of water that Margot has warmed by the fire. The water is soft and clean, drawn from the village well that morning, and it feels good against his skin after the day's dusty work. He dries himself with a linen towel that Margot wove herself, rough but absorbent, practical rather than luxurious. Little Sarah runs to greet her father, wrapping her small arms around his legs, chattering excitedly about her day's adventures. She's been helping her mother in the garden, learning the skills that will serve her throughout her life. Her small hands are stained with dirt and plant juices, evidence of useful work, and Edmund praises her efforts with the same seriousness he would show to an adult's contribution. Baby Thomas, now awake from his afternoon nap, crawls across the floor toward his father, babbling in the mysterious language that only babies speak. Edmund picks him up, holding him gently, feeling the solid weight of his son in his arms, the simple pleasure of a healthy child who knows he is loved and protected. The family gathers around their simple wooden table as the last light of day filters through the cottage windows. The meal they share is modest by any standard, but it represents abundance to them, abundance of effort rewarded, of community support, of divine blessing on their work. They eat slowly, savoring not just the food but the companionship, the sense of another day successfully completed. As they eat, Edmund tells his family about the final stages of the grain processing, describing how clean and perfect the kernels looked as they fell from the winnowing baskets. Margot shares her own day's accomplishments: the beans harvested and prepared, the herbs cut and hung to dry, the bread baked to perfection. Even little Sarah contributes to the conversation, describing in her child's language the worms she found in the garden and the butterfly that landed on her hand. This sharing of the day's experiences is more than casual conversation. It's the way the family stays connected, the way knowledge is passed from parents to children, the way the household functions as a coordinated unit. Each person's work contributes to the whole, and each person's experiences enrich the understanding of all. After the meal, as twilight deepens outside the cottage windows, the family settles into their evening activities. Edmund returns to his wood carving, working by the flickering light of the fire to shape the bowl he's making for Sarah. His hands move slowly and carefully, each cut deliberate and precise. Wood is too precious to waste on hasty work, and the bowl must be strong enough to last for years of daily use. The work is meditative, requiring concentration but not intense thought, allowing his mind to wander over the events of the day, the plans for tomorrow, the larger rhythms of the agricultural year. His hands know what to do almost without conscious direction, guided by years of experience and an intuitive understanding of how wood behaves under the knife. Margot continues her spinning, the wheel turning steadily as she transforms wool into thread. The rhythm of the wheel is soothing, a gentle mechanical heartbeat that provides a backdrop to the evening's quiet activities. The thread she creates will eventually become cloth, and the cloth will become garments for her family, protection against the cold of winter, evidence of her skill and dedication. As she spins, she tells stories to the children, not the elaborate fairy tales of later centuries, but simple stories rooted in daily life and local tradition. She tells about the miller's daughter who saved the village from flood by warning everyone in time to move to higher ground. She tells about the shepherd boy who found the lost sheep by following the sound of its bell through a thick fog. These stories serve multiple purposes. They entertain the children and help them settle toward sleep, but they also teach important lessons about courage, resourcefulness, and community responsibility. They connect the children to their heritage, helping them understand their place in the long chain of generations that stretches back into the mists of time. Little Sarah listens with rapt attention, her eyes wide in the firelight, occasionally asking questions that show she's following the story and thinking about its meaning. Baby Thomas, though too young to understand the words, is soothed by the sound of his mother's voice and the peaceful atmosphere of the cottage. As the stories continue, neighbors begin to arrive for the evening's social time. This has become a tradition following the successful harvest, people gathering to share in the satisfaction of work well done, to plan for the tasks ahead, to strengthen the bonds of community that make survival possible in this demanding world. Old William is among the first to arrive, moving slowly but steadily, his walking stick tapping gently on the packed earth floor of the cottage. He settles gratefully onto a bench near the fire, accepting a cup of ale from Margot with a nod of thanks. His presence brings a sense of continuity and wisdom. He has seen many harvests, weathered many seasons, survived challenges that the younger people can only imagine. Young Peter joins them, bringing news from the mill where he's been working. The mill has been busy processing grain from several villages, and Peter has heard gossip and news from the wider world. There are stories of good harvests in neighboring regions, news of marriages and deaths, rumors of changes in the laws that govern trade and taxation. This exchange of information is vital to the village's well-being. In a world without newspapers or electronic communication, news travels by word of mouth, carried by merchants, millers, traveling craftsmen, and other people whose work takes them beyond the boundaries of their home villages. The mill, serving several communities, becomes a natural center for the collection and distribution of news. Alice, the baker's wife, arrives with her own contribution to the evening's conversation. She's been busy preparing for the harvest festival that will take place in a few days, coordinating with other women to organize the communal feast that will celebrate the successful completion of the harvest. This festival is both a religious observance and a social celebration, bringing together elements of Thanksgiving, community bonding, and seasonal ritual. The preparations for the festival require careful planning and coordination. Each family will contribute something to the communal feast. Some will provide bread, others vegetables, still others will contribute precious meat or dairy products. The quantities must be calculated carefully to ensure there's enough for everyone, while not requiring any family to give more than they can afford. The conversation about the festival leads naturally to discussion of other seasonal celebrations and observances. The harvest festival is just one point in the cycle of celebrations that mark the agricultural year, each one serving to strengthen community bonds while marking the passage of time and the completion of important work. As the evening progresses, the talk turns to winter preparations. The harvest is complete, but there's still much work to be done before the cold weather arrives. Firewood must be cut and stacked, root cellars must be stocked with vegetables, meat must be preserved, clothing must be repaired, and new garments sewn. Edmund discusses his plans for cutting firewood, coordinating with other men to work together in the forest that surrounds the village. This work requires cooperation. Trees must be selected carefully to avoid damaging the forest's ability to regenerate, and the heavy logs must be transported back to the village through coordinated effort. Margot talks about her plans for preserving food, sharing techniques with the other women for drying vegetables, making sausages, storing apples and other fruits so they'll last through winter. This knowledge is passed down from mother to daughter, refined through generations of experience, adapted to local conditions, and available resources. The children listen to these adult conversations with the attention of young people who are learning their future roles in the community. Sarah is already beginning to understand the complexity of household management, the way that dozens of small tasks must be coordinated to ensure the family's survival and comfort. Even baby Thomas, though too young to understand the words, is absorbing the rhythms and patterns of community interaction. As the night deepens, the conversation becomes more reflective, turning to the broader patterns of life and the lessons learned from the year's experiences. Old William shares observations from his long life, comparing this year's harvest to others he remembers, drawing connections between weather patterns and crop yields, between community cooperation and individual success. His words carry the weight of experience and the authority of age. In a world where written records are rare and literacy is limited to a small elite, the memories of elders serve as the community's library, preserving knowledge and wisdom that might otherwise be lost. Young people listen respectfully, understanding that they are receiving valuable education that will serve them throughout their lives. The fire burns lower as the evening progresses, its flames settling into a steady, comfortable glow that provides warmth without overwhelming brightness. The cottage is filled with the soft sounds of comfortable conversation, the gentle breathing of children who are growing sleepy, the occasional crackle of burning wood. One by one, the visitors begin to take their leave. Old William is the first to go, gathering his walking stick and making his careful way home through the dark village streets. The others follow gradually, each expressing gratitude for the hospitality and the pleasant evening, each contributing to the sense of community satisfaction that comes from shared celebration. When the last visitor has gone, the family begins its bedtime preparations. This is a gentle process, unhurried and peaceful, following routines that have been established through years of practice. the children are washed and dressed for sleep, their day clothes folded and set aside for tomorrow. Edmund banks the fire carefully, arranging the logs and coals to ensure that warmth will last through the night and that coals will survive to rekindle the fire in the morning. This is skilled work, requiring knowledge of how different woods burn, how air circulation affects combustion, how to balance the need for warmth against the danger of fire. Margot puts away her spinning wheel and gathers up the children's toys, restoring order to the cottage for the night. She checks the water containers, ensures that the food is properly covered and protected, performs the dozens of small tasks that maintain a household in good order. The family gathers for evening prayers, kneeling together beside the dying fire. Their prayers are simple and heartfelt, expressions of gratitude for the day's blessings, requests for protection through the night, hopes for continued health and prosperity. The children add their own small petitions, their innocent faith touching and beautiful in its simplicity. As they prepare for bed, Edmund and Margot talk quietly about the next day's plans. There's firewood to be cut, more vegetables to be harvested from the garden, preparations to be made for the harvest festival. The conversation is practical, but also intimate, the kind of planning that married couples do to coordinate their lives and work together effectively. The cottage grows quiet as the family settles into sleep. Outside, the village rests peacefully under the stars, its inhabitants secure in the knowledge that the harvest has been successful, that winter preparations are underway, that the ancient cycle of seasons continues as it has for countless generations. But the night is not empty of activity. In the barns, the stored grain continues its slow process of curing and stabilizing. In the gardens, plants grow imperceptibly, drawing nutrients from the soil, preparing for the gradual slowdown that will come with shorter days and cooler weather. In the forest, animals forage and hunt, following their own ancient rhythms of survival and reproduction. The mill wheel continues its slow revolution, grinding grain that was brought in during the day, its gentle splash and creak providing a soothing background to the night's quiet. The water that powers the wheel flows steadily from the hills, carrying nutrients from the forest to the fields, part of the great cycle of water and weather that makes all life possible. In the church, the night prayers are said by the priest, his Latin words rising into the darkness like incense, connecting the village to the wider community of faith that stretches across continents and centuries. The prayers are both personal and universal, asking for blessings on this particular community while acknowledging membership in a larger spiritual family. The stars wheel overhead in their eternal patterns, the same constellations that guided ancient farmers in their planting and harvesting, the same celestial clock that has marked time since the beginning of human agriculture. In their light, the village sleeps peacefully, secure in its place in the natural order, confident in the value of its work and the strength of its community bonds. As the night deepens toward its darkest hour, a gentle peace settles over the village like a soft blanket. This is the peace that comes from work well done, from responsibilities met, from the knowledge that one has contributed to the welfare of family and community. It's a peace that our modern world, with all its conveniences and distractions, rarely achieves. The cottage where Edmund and Margot sleep with their children is warm and secure, its thick walls keeping out the night cold, its banked fire providing steady warmth. The family sleeps deeply, the profound rest that comes from physical tiredness and spiritual satisfaction. Their dreams, if they remember them, are simple and pleasant, dreams of successful harvests, of healthy children, of community celebrations. In the morning, they will wake to begin another day's work, but it will be different work, appropriate to the season and the community's needs. The urgent pressure of harvest time has passed, replaced by the steady, patient work of winter preparation. There will be time for more social activities, for the crafts and skills that flourish when the immediate demands of agriculture allow some leisure. The rhythm of their lives will continue, following the ancient patterns that have sustained human communities for thousands of years. They will plant and harvest, work and rest, celebrate and mourn, following the great wheel of the seasons in their endless comforting cycle. And in this rhythm, in this acceptance of their place in the natural order, in this commitment to work and community and faith, they find a kind of peace that transcends the hardships and uncertainties of their daily lives. It's not the peace of ease or luxury, but the deeper peace that comes from living in harmony with natural law, from understanding one's place and purpose, from contributing to something larger than oneself. As dawn approaches, bringing with it the promise of another day's work and another opportunity for useful contribution, the village rests in this peaceful confidence. The harvest is safely gathered, the grain securely stored, the community strengthened by shared effort and mutual support. Whatever challenges the future may bring, they will face them together with the wisdom of experience and the strength of community cooperation. The sun will rise soon, painting the eastern sky with gentle colors, calling the village to another day of work and life. But for now, in these quiet hours before dawn, there is only peace, the deep, satisfying peace of work completed, of duties fulfilled, of life lived in harmony with the rhythms of earth and season and the ancient wisdom of those who have gone before. In this peace, our journey through the medieval world finds its natural resting place. We have walked with these gentle people through their days of work and rest, shared their simple meals and quiet satisfactions, observed their careful attention to the tasks that sustained life in their demanding but rewarding world. Their lives were hard by our standards, filled with physical labor and material uncertainty that most of us cannot imagine. But they were also rich in ways that our modern world has largely forgotten, rich in community connection, in spiritual depth, in the satisfaction of useful work, in harmony with natural rhythms, in the peace that comes from knowing one's place and fulfilling one's responsibilities. As we return to our own time and our own concerns, we carry with us the memory of their quiet wisdom, their patient acceptance of life's challenges, their commitment to family and community, their trust in the providence that governs all human affairs. In their example, we find not a model to imitate exactly, but an inspiration to live more thoughtfully, more peacefully, more in harmony with the deepest rhythms of life. The medieval world sleeps peacefully in the darkness before dawn, secure in its ancient wisdom, confident in its enduring values. And we, having visited them in imagination, can find in their peace a measure of our own rest, a reminder that life's greatest satisfactions come not from wealth or power or fame, but from work well done, love freely given, and faith deeply held. Sleep well, dear friend, in the knowledge that the human spirit, in every age and circumstance, finds ways to create meaning, to build community, to transform the raw materials of existence into something approaching the sacred. The medieval peasants and servants whose lives we have shared knew this truth in their bones, and in their quiet wisdom we find our own path to rest and peace. The village sleeps, the stars wheel overhead, and all is well in the gentle darkness before the dawn of another day. And so our journey comes to its peaceful close, like the gentle dying of embers in a hearth well tended, like the soft closing of eyes, heavy with the satisfaction of a day well lived. Rest now, and let the wisdom of these ancient people carry you into your own quiet dreams, where the rhythms of a simpler time can soothe your spirit and restore your soul. Sleep well, dear friend. Sleep well.